There he is, Jon Fitch. Jon, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Ariel?
I'm doing great. Great to talk to you, and congratulations on the big news. Could you explain what happened with WSOF slash PFL? You were their champion. They rebrand. How did you leave that organization? How did that go down?
This is prize fighting, and I'm in the business of winning titles. And I think there's more competition and better people to fight in Bellator. And I just wanted to chase another title, and it was more appealing to me to jump ship and go to Bellator and track down another title than it was to enter a tournament, fight 5 times in 6 months, and win a title and then lose it in the same night.
Okay. So you asked for you still had fights left, or did everything kind of start at zero once they rebranded?
No, I mean they have to honor the contracts, and there are some parts of my contract that the most thing I was most worried about is not being active. It's the worst thing for a fighter is to be healthy and ready to fight and then not be active, not be offered fights. So I had some provisions in my contract that said they had to offer me certain fights in certain time frames. They failed to do so, so I just held them to the contract. They either needed to provide the fights, pay me for the fights they didn't give me, or release me, and they chose to release me.
Okay. Was Bellator your top choice? Is that where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think so. It's my hometown. They do a lot of shows here.
Yeah.
I really like Scott Coker. I'm sorry, Scott Coker, and I think he's the best promoter in the business right now.
Why?
I think he's been doing this for a very long time, and he's done it very well. I think he puts together a better show, and I think if it wasn't for the UFC's monopoly, he would probably be dominating the market.
You've never fought for Scott before, obviously, but of course, a mainstay in the San Jose region, and as you mentioned, been doing this for a long time. Did you have any kind of relationship before this negotiation?
Yeah, we're friends. We've talked. We've hung out before. I've had dinner with the man. I know people who worked with him intimately and have for many years. People I'm friends with, and nobody has anything negative to say about him.
And you're back at A.K.A. now, right?
Yes, we moved back to San Jose. Vegas was great. One Kick Nick was amazing. I still work with Nick. The guys I got to train and spar with and everything. Chidi and Jikawani especially. A lot of great guys at One Kick's gym, but we just didn't have the family support that we do here in San Jose. And with 2 kids, it was difficult to manage, I think, when we were in Vegas.
Okay. So you get the Bellator deal. You're on this big stage. You're fighting at home, and you're fighting Paul Daley. And these are two marquee names. I think the
Great
welterweight
fight.
division is the best division in Bellator right now. It's the deepest in Bellator. Right off the bat, it seems this is a tough style matchup for Paul Daley. Historically, he's had trouble with wrestlers. Did you think the same? Were you surprised
Um,
that they gave you Daley, or maybe given his troubles with the organization, maybe this was a punishment for speaking out? I don't know. What did you think?
I think I'm a bad stylistic matchup for everybody.
Okay.
That should be my nickname. Bad stylistic matchup.
Right. Fair.
There's not too many people who are like, oh yeah, that's a great matchup for them against Jon Fitch. It just doesn't. No, I have too many tools to my disposal, and I'm a cardio machine, and I'm just meaner than most people, and it's hard to beat mean.
How far away do you think you are from the Roy McDonald orbit?
I don't want to look past Paul Daley. He's tough, and there's other tough guys out there, But I think by the end of the year, if things go well, if I'm healthy, if he's healthy, it's a possibility for sure.
Of course, we all remember UFC 87. Is this your chance to right that wrong? You can't fight GSP, but maybe he's the next best thing. Is this part of your motivation?
I'm in the business to fight the best guys in the world. I'm not here just to talk trash and be on TV. I wanna challenge myself. I want to fight the best. Um, that's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to go to Bellator. Is there's not really many people or anybody left for me to fight in the PFL. Jake Shields is probably their best guy. I beat Okami already. There's not a lot for me there.
Right. And of course, Okami is in the UFC now, so he's not there
Oh yeah.
as well. You are obviously always vocal about the state of MMA, and you're doing great work trying to help the sport evolve. And I see you're wearing the MMAFA
Mhm.
shirt. How do you feel about the state of MMA in 2018?
It's slowly getting better, but it's still not a free market. We have no free market. There's no leverage for the fighters. You know, just look at Mighty Mouse. He tried to leverage his position, and they threatened to get rid of his whole weight class. That just goes to tell you there's absolutely zero leverage on the fighter's side, and there's no way to have leverage until we get to own our titles and our rank. And the only way to do that is an independent sanctioning body.
So when you say there's no free market, I mean, like when you were released, you could sign with whomever you want, right? Isn't that a free market?
I mean, does is Rory McDonald considered the best welterweight in the world? Is Tyrone Woodley going to leave the UFC with his belt and fight Rory to prove that he's the best?
Right. But isn't that the case in every
So
sport?
no,
Like if I'm signed by the Orlando Magic for
no.
4 years,
If you're if you win a championship in the NFL for the Bills or whoever,
right?
you can go to another team the next year if they bid for more money.
Well, not if you have
That's not
you have a
ever going to
contract,
happen.
but you sign a
The
4-year
contracts
deal.
never end. The contracts never end in the UFC. If you win the belt, you must defend it under
Okay,
contract. That's one of the issues.
right. So you have a problem with like the champions clause because every fighter signs for like X amount of fights, but you're saying the term there's no term usually, right? It's not a 2-year deal, so it'll expire after 2 years. You have to fulfill those 6 fights or 8 fights, whatever.
And if you win the championship, first off, you won't even get a title shot unless you have more than one fight on your contract. If you only have one fight in your contract, you'll never get a title shot. They will force you to sign an extension, and then once you win the title shot, you're forced to defend it. In boxing, you can go free agent the second you win a belt.
Did these these values, did this come into play when you were deciding where you were going to go next? In other words, do you feel like Bellator doesn't have these restrictions contractually?
Everybody does, but I mean, I have to feed my family,
Yeah.
and it's either I don't feed my family or I dive headfirst into an exploitive environment, and we don't really have a choice. It's either fight and make money under these conditions, or retire and go somewhere else and maybe make money or not make money.
I'm sure you heard about
It's
the
just
new
not a free market.
right the new Project Spearhead group, headed up by Leslie Smith. What, if anything, do you know about it? And more importantly, how do you feel about it?
I mean, a single entity labor union will not work in a mixed martial arts. If you have no leverage at all, then there's no way for you to have a CBA that's going to do anything. When the promoter can willy-nilly strip belts, take your rank. I was fired when I was ranked number 9. Somebody else was just given that rank. Um, I mean, if you look at the WWE could eliminate their entire roster and continue forward with no problems with a brand new set of people. There's nothing stopping the UFC or any other promotion from doing that exact same thing.
So you feel like something like this, it's a mistake for them to just be a UFC only, even though would you not agree that the UFC fighters and the Bellator fighters are sort of playing under different rules, like with the Reebok deal and USADA? There's different things that apply to them that don't apply to you in Bellator. So isn't it hard to get everyone on this uniform playing field?
I mean, the USADA and the uniform is not an example of those fighters being employees. That's a demonstration of the Mansapani power of the UFC. They're the uniforms are not evidence of employee status. They're exhibit one of Mansapani power. UFC athletes have no say. These terms are imposed on them precisely because the UFC is a dominant monopoly and monopolist. The athletes have no negotiating power whatsoever.
But isn't that exactly what an employee, like you just tell an employee, you have to wear this, you have to do this, you have to be, isn't that exactly, uh,
Again, that's not evidence of being an employee. That's a demonstration of their monopsony power. That's a part of our class action lawsuit.
right? How is the lawsuit going, in your opinion?
Well, we're waiting for the status of being. They're going to rule on our class. We're going to get our class status if they find that we've all been damaged in the same way. All fighters from 2010 till present day, if we've been damaged in the same way, we'll get the class and then we'll move forward from there.
There was a revelation that came out as far as the lawsuit is concerned from the UFC's lawyers, saying essentially that it's impossible to compare the fighters to professional athletes of the four major sports because they're unionized and these guys aren't, meaning you guys. And at least it read to me like he was saying it's a mistake for the MMA fighters, UFC fighters to not be unionized because you don't get certain advantages and of course you don't have a seat at the table. Did you see that and did you feel the same way about that response?
I mean, why are they only stating the UFC's experts? We had we have the premier leading economist expert Zambalist
Andrew
give his
Zimbalist.
statements too, and he talked about why they have their monopoly power. Why is that quote stated?
What do you mean? By who?
Another
The media?
sport, another the media and the other organizations out there. The fact is, if
Go ahead, sir.
the league sports are league sports because they have 30 to 32 owners and entities. You're talking about a single owner entity.
Yeah.
There's no negotiating with the single owner entity. They have all the power. They can just take away your rank and title at any time they choose to. They can create a new rank and title anytime they choose to. They can fire everybody on the roster that has a loss and replace them quite easily and just give new ranks to new people.
Right. But in boxing, if someone is if I'm signed by Lou DiBella, I can't just leave Lou DiBella either, right? I mean, you can't just go willy nilly.
Well, that's a manager, not a promoter.
I would say, actually no, Lou DiBella I would say is a promoter. Like Lou DiBella, Bob Arum, Oscar De these are promoters,
oh,
right?
I'm sorry.
You know what I mean?
They are promoters, yes. But you have legitimate promoters competing against them, and the athletes can promote themselves if they choose to. So if you don't like the way the promoter is doing something, you could actually go to the other promoter and still compete for the top belt. You can't do that in MMA. We're not really a sport. You can't say, oh, this promoter is doing a bad job of promoting me. This promoter isn't doing a good job. He's not giving me good splits of the money. I'm going to leave this promoter and sign with another promoter. You won't have the same status. You will not have a single MMA or UFC fighter leaving and be respected on the same level and have the chances to make the same amount of money if he goes to anywhere else. And he can't promote himself.
I mean, Rory McDonald did that, and he's probably making more money in Bellator than the UFC.
Because the UFC was suppressing his wages, not because he had the chance to fight for the highest title there is to own, and then use that as leverage to gain more of the percentage of the revenue made.
Okay, I mean, I guess that's arguable, but I get your point. I also want.
It's not arguable; it's a fact.
Well,
that's a fact, and economists have come forward and made statements in our case proving that.
But I mean, our next guest too, Gegard Mousasi, left the UFC on a winning streak, went and signed with Bellator because they were paying him more, and seems to be enjoying.
And he still will not maximize his profits the way he would in a free market. Free agency and free market is the only thing that drive up pay.
He was in a free market.
It's not a free market. He can't fight for the UFC title. The UFC title is the belt that pays the most money. No matter how much he gets paid by Bellator, he's never going to make as much money as if he owned the UFC title, ever.
I don't know how you can say that.
I can say it because our economist is saying it.
Well, I mean, you're
people
comparing
whose job it is to know
You're comparing one organization who's 7 years old to another who's 25. They're not playing under the same rules.
I'm comparing a company who's monopolized the market and controls 90% of the market share, who only pays out 17% to its athletes. Back in the early 1900s, when boxing had its monopoly scheme going on, they were paying their boxers 25%. NCAA athletes today make 22% of the revenues made. UFC fighters make 17%.
Listen, we're coming from the same place. I talk about this almost ad nauseum on my program. I do disagree with some of the things, but I appreciate the passion and the insight. I want to ask you quickly before I let you go. It seems, because sometimes I get tagged in the tweets, you're not a fan of the MMA media as well. Is that accurate? Do you feel like we're not doing a good enough job of reporting on this?
I feel that your hands are tied. I don't want to attack anybody. I don't attack any managers. I don't attack any promoters. I don't attack any of the sports media, because you guys have your hands tied. When the monopoly is in place, they have control over the entire market. Anybody who stands up to them is punished. You face this yourself. You got fired from your job in reporting.
Oh no.
And that's they do those things to scare people. They do to scare people. I'm sure no one else tries it. I know that the media gets handed talking points and told who to cover and when to cover them. That's not a secret, and I don't blame anybody for it. It's a symptom of the disease of a monopoly. Everybody else is suffering through this, and even promoters who exist in this market today have nothing to do with it. The Fertittas are gone. They're out of here. They cashed their checks and took off. They made a mess and they left. Now the rest of us have to deal with it.
Right. Do you see a light at the end of this tunnel? Do you feel like in your career?
Absolutely. When we go to DC, when I've been paying out of pocket to self lobby and go to DC, push for the Aliyah. When I talk to politicians, they're lawyers and business owners. When we show them contracts, when we tell them the situation, they cannot believe it. It's gotten this bad. They can't believe something like this happens in this day and age. And they're easily jumping on to support. I feel that we're going to pass Aliyah through this year, and within 2 years' time, until 2020, we'll have a free market. We'll be able to see who's really the best fighters in the world, and fighters will actually get to negotiate for real contracts and health care and all that stuff. Until that happens, we have no leverage, absolutely zero leverage. No CBA will ever do anything in a single entity monopoly.
But do you agree though that it is important, at least in this structure, to have a seat at the table? In other words, if Bellator came and said,
"What seat at the table? It's a kids' table. It's a kids'
"No, but listen,
table.
listen.
It's not,
If
unless
Bellator,
there's a
if
free
Bellator
market,
came
there's
to you,
no."
if Bellator came to you and said, for your fight on May 12th, starting April 1st, you cannot have any sponsors anymore, and you can only wear what we tell you to wear, and we're going to drug test you 24/7, 365. Would you not at least like a say in that?
They would be guilty of monsompany, and that's illegal, and they would get lawsuits against them.
Okay, but well, that's happening in the UFC, and that's why Project Spearhead is probably
And they have a
valuable, right?
lawsuit against them.
Well, not, but
They have a lawsuit against them.
you didn't suffer that. The current fighters are suffering that. So why not be for the Project Spearhead in addition to MMAFA?
I didn't have to deal with the Reebok deal, but I did have to deal with them taxing my sponsors,
Yes,
putting
you
my
did.
sponsors out of business because they forced them to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars just to sponsor me $3,000.
Yep, yep, that
It's
is
the
true.
same scheme. It's the same controlled scheme.
As someone who is deeply invested in this, are you in favor of Project Spearhead?
What I don't understand is everything that we have been pushing for and trying, they seem to be adopting, except Leslie Smith especially could not get support for any of her views in our group. And she continually broke our trust with speaking about confidentially spoken about things in our private chats.
Okay.
That's something that's not okay. We had secret private chats that were made public by her.
Oh,
That's the number one reason why she was asked to leave. But she seems dead set on creating a single entity UFC monopoly, and that's a death wish to everybody. You cannot have a successful CBA under a single entity monopoly. It only works if there's multiple owners who are on the same playing field. And there is nobody at the match of the UFC. Nobody is on equal ground with the UFC, not even close. Nobody is knocking down the door to leave the UFC to go to Bellator because their title is going to bring them more money. If you want respect and you want the most money possible for you as a fighter, you have to go to the UFC. You do not have a choice.
we get to. I would love to talk about this with you for hours. I love this topic. I think it's somewhat ironic that you say that it's being Gegard Mousasi, who literally just did that. But I respect where you're coming from, and more importantly, I appreciate how passionate you are about this.
He left because of frustrations. He left because of frustrations, and he may be making more money, but it's more money on a restricted level. The pay scale is restricted. Like, he's never going to maximize his profits. He's never going to get a real piece of the puzzle, the piece of the pie. He's not going to get a real percentage. And the fear mongering that people put that the Ali Act is going to turn us into boxing is BS.
Right.
We have different fan bases, right? You're never going to have a card where you just put the two top fighters like McGregor and Mayweather. You're never going to get a card like that. The fight fans won't stand for it. We're never going to make 85% of the gross revenue. If we may make 60 to 70%, then we'll have a fuller card, just like MMA fans want. That's our future, not a CBA under one single entity monopoly. It's not going to happen. You have fight careers in the UFC. The top guys who are in the main event, it's 2.5 years, less than 2.5 years. The top guys. That's not even the league minimum in the NFL to join their association. And that's removing people who've had only one fight. How are you going to have those guys pay into a pension if the top guys don't even fight 2.5 years? What kind of pension? What kind of health care? Where's the money going to come from? Are you just going to take the money from the guys who have been there from 10 years and they're going to pay for the health care for guys who have one fight? How's that going to work?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you, Jon. I really appreciate it. Would love to invite you back on to talk about this, but we were out of time. Congratulations on the new deal with Bellator and looking forward to your debut.
Thank you very much.